Hello, how are you? Today I've put together a list for you of foods that can harm or worsen joint pain. Many people suffer from knee pain, hip pain, have arthritis, have gout, and ask me which foods they should avoid. So stay until the end because you won't want to miss this. If you love tips on nutrition, health, and fitness, you're going to love this channel. Take the opportunity to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. I have new videos every day. You're going to love them. Let's start by talking about these foods I've selected, which are bad choices to add to your daily routine and can worsen inflammation and pain in people who are more prone to joint pain. I have videos here on the channel where I talk more about knee pain, about different types of pain, and I already have a playlist on joints, which I'll leave down below for you. It even covers some good foods, supplements, and more. But actually, it's no use just focusing on good foods, good supplements, or things you can do in your daily life to improve joint pain if you systematically consume a lot of foods that are bad for you. Because at best, it will just break even. If you eat something good and also eat something bad, on average, things will pretty much stay the same as before. So ideally, you should find out which foods are bad so you can avoid consuming them as much as possible in your daily life. The first food on our list has to be processed, ultra-processed, and industrialized foods. That's because usually these highly processed foods contain sugar in their composition and fats, which are of course the worst kinds of fats. Usually these are hydrogenated fats because they are more stable from a technological standpoint in terms of shelf life, flavor, and the crispiness of the food. So they end up being a real health bomb loaded with sugar, which is highly pro-inflammatory, and also with these trans fats, which are very inflammatory as well. So if you can avoid them, that would be great. Remember that I have a video here where I talk more about how not to be fooled when reading food labels, because there are some really useful tips you can keep in mind when you're buying these processed foods. Because everyone eats processed foods, there's no way around it. Even brown rice comes packaged. So, it's hard to give them up, which is why it's important for you to know how to read the label so you don't get fooled. I'll leave that video down below. If you don't know or don't remember, the name of the video is right here. There's an arrow here. Just click and a tab will open. I'll leave these videos and those other ones I mentioned about joints and everything else that might help you. So, some examples if you want ideas of what you should avoid: frozen pizza, those pre-made industrialized nuggets, industrial ice cream, ready-made cakes, especially those with that really creamy filling that's pure trans fat. So be very careful. Packaged savory snacks, all those industrialized foods, when you look at it and it doesn't even look like real food, it looks like something manufactured, you should avoid consuming it. Another food group you really need to be careful with is red meat, especially when it's cooked at very high temperatures. For example, barbecue on the grill, or that piece of meat you left in the pan until it got really blackened with that crust on the outside. Those cooking methods can change the meat in ways that aren't so good for your health. That's because that crust contains advanced glycation end products, which are highly pro-inflammatory, and usually the fat in meat is a more inflammatory fat. So ideally, you should consume it in moderation and avoid those blackened crusts, avoid barbecue, because that further promotes inflammation in your body. Foods that are high in sugar, in a broad sense, will also greatly increase this pro-inflammatory signaling, as I mentioned. In fact, I already have a video here talking about how many days you need without sugar to see an improvement in your metabolism and how to go without sugar, with some practical tips on how to remove it from your daily routine. Because when we talk about cutting out sugar, we're not talking about eliminating sweet flavors. And in that video, I share some really cool tips, which I won't get into here so this video doesn't get too long. So, if you specifically have a problem with sugar and want some tips, you can watch it. But sugar is highly pro-inflammatory and is one of the least beneficial foods for us to consume daily, because it is basically empty calories. Besides being pro-inflammatory, it also promotes weight gain, which will worsen pain issues as well, since you'll be putting more pressure on your joints. So try to eliminate it from your diet as much as possible. For many people, gluten can be pro-inflammatory and can even worsen joint pain. In fact, this may be related to a gluten sensitivity, not necessarily celiac disease. I have a video here talking about gluten sensitivity, and I'll leave it down below in the description. There's also another one about the main sources of gluten. But actually, foods that contain wheat, barley, and rye are sources of gluten. So bread, beer, all of these have gluten in your daily life. And we need to make a note about oats, because many people think oats contain gluten, but naturally they do not. What happens is that some oats, because they are processed industrially on the same machines as wheat, for example, end up being contaminated. So, if you are restricting gluten to check whether or not you have a sensitivity, pay attention to this on the label when you buy your oats. For some people who have gout, who have elevated uric acid, consuming foods rich in purines will worsen the progression of the disease of gout and will lead to more joint pain. I already have a video here talking more about gout, about high uric acid and what to do, the best and worst foods, and I'll leave it here in the description for you as well. But I'll go ahead and tell you that lamb, beef, bacon, and some seafood, like shrimp and mussels for example, are very rich in purines and can worsen inflammation in the presence of gout. Fried foods are also harmful for those who have joint problems because usually when you fry, you use a vegetable oil. I have a video here talking about the best and worst oils, and usually the most commonly used oil for frying is soybean oil, which is one of the worst to use, precisely because it is very inflammatory. That's when people aren't using trans fat to fry, which is what often happens in the industry in fast food restaurants, those big chains that fry their fries in trans fat, and you thought that was oil, but it's not. So this is highly pro-inflammatory for you, but on top of that, fat is very high in calories and will also contribute a lot to weight gain, which in turn will greatly impact your blood pressure and put extra strain on your joints. So it ends up being a very bad vicious cycle that makes your pain worse. Monosodium glutamate can also worsen this inflammatory process for some people. It can increase some pro-inflammatory signals and it causes you to retain more fluid because monosodium glutamate usually contains a lot of salt. So this can lead to swelling. Of course, there are some types of soy sauce with less sodium, which are the light soy sauces. I have a video here on the channel where I talk more about soy sauce. But in any case, it will still have this issue of increasing the possibility of inflammation. So consume it in moderation. And if you can avoid it in your daily life, it will be better for you. Many refined carbohydrates can also contain advanced glycation end products, just like red meat, that black crust we talked about. So be careful not to consume them in excess, especially because they can also lead to weight gain and increase the strain on your joints. Many studies have already found a correlation between alcohol consumption and arthritis for some people, and they found that people who do not drink alcohol have a lower chance, a lower probability of developing arthritis. Furthermore, alcohol also contains purines in its composition in many alcoholic beverages, and this can promote and trigger gout episodes once again, which also worsens the inflammatory issues in the joints. Some vegetables that contain solanine, such as eggplant, bell pepper, and tomato, are reported by some people to trigger joint pain. Some people say they can't eat eggplant because their joints become painful and a bit more swollen. This can vary from person to person, and it's always worth testing to see if this happens to you or not, because the results can differ greatly, and these are nutritious foods. Of all the ones I've mentioned here, these are the only ones that are actually nutritious and should be included in a traditional diet. So since they have a lot of nutrients, antioxidants, fiber, vitamins, and minerals, it's always a good idea for you to try going a few days or a week without them and see if you feel any better or not. If you happen to be sensitive to them, you can try eliminating them from your diet. Let me know down below which of these foods will be the hardest for you to resist and which will be the easiest for you to cut out of your daily routine, because it's easy and you do just fine without them. I'd love to see your comment. Give the video a like because that really helps me out, and share it with anyone who might enjoy it or needs it. Let's work together to spread this positive movement because that's what I want here on the channel. See you next time. Bye.